I was told I had to use this. Right. Thank you for coming. I'm going to be doing 2 short talks in English, back to back, about using English in an international context. The first one is called Don't Say Quite. And the second is The Joy of Phrasal Verbs. Thank you. Excellent. This first one is a Shout Along With Me mini presentation. My name's Tim Morley, by the way. Hello. This is a Shout Along With Me mini presentation. You need to shout stuff at me while I'm doing the presentation. It's not going to... Don't shout. Get off at me. Shush. You need to shout stuff at me as we're doing the presentation. Just before we get to it, I want to share with you a photo that a friend Paul tweeted to me this week. On the subject of quite. Okay, this it starts off. This is from a train station left luggage office, and it says baggage lockers definitive opening. So already alarm bells are ringing, and it continues. Quite opening of deposit is definitive. So like. I could abandon the whole talk and just do 45 minutes on how the role of the translator is tragically underestimated or undervalued by everybody, from individuals to national, national government-owned corporations. This is by the SNCF in France. This is in the Gare de Lyon. That's bloody terrible. But the person who wrote that is not the target audience of my talk. I'm going to assume that you do actually know how to use the word quite. You've come across it before, and you think you know what to do with it. But actually, I'm going to hopefully going to show you in the next 15 minutes that you don't. That every time you use quite, at least half of your audience is going to misunderstand what you think you said. And that worse than that, it's not just that they'll misunderstand, but they won't even be aware that other people understood it differently. All right, and it goes like this. We're going to do it old school style. On here we go. Right, so, hey yo. Now, in order to do this, you're going to need to shout at me higher or lower. Okay? So we're going to do a quick practice before we start. Could you all please shout higher? Higher! Excellent. Okay. And can we get a lower? Lower! Brilliant. Right. To make it easier to hear the difference, actually, if you could do higher in a high voice, that would be much easier, and lower in a low voice. Okay, so if you're going to shout higher, can you do it now in a high voice? Higher! And lower. Lower. Brilliant. Okay, now, on to the subject of the talk. Quite. What do we use it for? It's usually used with an adjective. It modifies an adjective. It's one of a whole group of words that you can use to modify the strength of an adjective. So you take an adjective like good. You can say something's good. You can say it's very good, or a bit good, or somewhat good. You can say it's quite good. And if you say it's... okay, let's start with an easy one. Okay, I've got very good here. So am I going to put it higher or lower? Higher, okay, louder and higher. So we're going to put very good up there. Okay, cool. Now, I've got quite good. Where am I going to put it? Higher or lower? Lower. Oh, right. Higher. I could just put the microphone down now. I've already got people disagreeing on whether this goes higher or lower. Once more, quite loud, please, so I can hear what the majority say. Higher or lower? Lower. Okay, most people said lower, but there was a little bit of higher in there. Okay, right, we'll put that there. Thank you. I've got delicious here. Absolutely delicious. Higher. Okay, I agree with that. What about quite delicious? Oh, okay, most people said higher, but there were only about a third of the people said anything. Everyone else is going, okay, everybody together. Quite delicious. 1, 2, 3. Not sure. The majority was saying higher, but it wasn't a very confident one. Okay, we'll come back to it. By the way, I meant to say... That's not what I meant to say. I meant to say, if you're a native English speaker, you might disagree with one or two of the conclusions that I come to during the talk, but I am going to modify a few and explain them later. So if you've got any questions, do please ask them at the end, but let's wait until the end. So I've got hungry here. Let's do slightly hungry. Higher or lower? Lower. Lower. Okay, cool. I've got very hungry. Higher. Thank you. And I've got quite hungry. That was 50-50. Nobody's got any idea. Okay, right. Here we go. We've got tasty. I've got absolutely tasty. Nobody says absolutely tasty. That's nonsense. Quite tasty. Nobody, oh, don't be shy, come on. I'm not going to pick on anybody in particular. After 3, what do you understand? If I say, oh, that was quite tasty, what do you think? Higher or lower? Genuine mixture again, okay, we don't know. Okay, acceptable. Perfectly acceptable. Higher, okay, thank you. Quite acceptable. Lower. Uh-huh. Okay, I've got superb. Quite superb. Lower. Interesting. Okay. And I've got sick here. Don't sit at the back. Come right down to the front. Come right down to the front. I need you to shout at me. Come down to the front. Come down to the front. You've nearly missed this bit, but come down to the front. Come down to the front. And I've got sick here. If someone's quite sick, higher or lower? Higher. Okay. Quite interesting. Okay. Right. Now, we've seen already there was some disagreement about these two. Somebody who's quite hungry, something that's quite tasty. Is quite tasty a stronger statement or a weaker statement than just tasty? To a certain extent, it depends on the tone of voice and your expression as you say it. Oh, it's quite tasty. That sounds good. Quite tasty, yeah, sounds negative. So there is an element of that, but even with a neutral tone, it could be taken either way. Now, there are rules for this. The rule generally is that with a strong adjective like delicious or superb, or even acceptable, quite makes it stronger. So quite delicious is a more positive thing to say about something than merely delicious. Quite superb. Native English speakers, would you not agree that should be up there? Yeah. Quite superb. Even more so, yeah. But quite superb. It is a stronger compliment than merely superb. It doesn't weaken it, it strengthens it. Same with acceptable. Quite acceptable. Debatable. It could go either way, but I would put that somewhere in the middle. Quite good is almost certainly less strong than good. So with the strong adjectives, it makes them stronger. With the normal adjectives, it makes them weaker. In British English, in American English, Americans tend to understand most of these to be up here. Quite acceptable, it's clearly up there, and quite sick is a weird one. I heard a story about a British doctor who was working in the States, working at a hospital in the States, and got a phone call saying, "Could you come and see this patient? She's quite sick." And he said, "Yeah, I'll finish my lunch. I'll do my rounds in the afternoon." I was like, "No, she's quite sick." Yeah, it was like, "She's nearly dying. Can you come now?" I was like, "All right, I'm on my way. Why didn't you say so?" The British doctor understood quite sick to be, she'll live, she'll be fine until this afternoon. The American who was speaking meant, this is seriously ill, need urgent attention right now. It depends somewhat on the tone of voice, but the British people tend to understand it down here. Americans are much more likely to understand it up there. But it's even worse than that, because the vast, vast majority of British and American native speakers are not aware of this difference. I'd been teaching English for 10 years before I came across this difference. I've never seen it in a grammar book. So if you have any kind of mixed audience at all, you will be misunderstood by at least half of your audience if you use the word quite. Even native speakers, between ourselves, we can't agree on what it means. And if you're talking to non-native speakers, or if you're a non-native speaker speaking to non-native speakers, you've no idea whether they learned British English or American English or something, some mixture of the two, whether they learned all the same. No idea. The word is pointless. Don't use it. It's decoration, but whatever you think you're saying when you use it, you will be misunderstood by a good number of the people that you're speaking to. I was explaining this to a German exchange, not a student, a professional adult. He was in Cambridge doing an intensive English course, and he was staying with a family. And this is one of the things that I taught him about. And as I was explaining it, this kind of look of horror kind of came over his face, and I could see him thinking, oh my God. Oh. I was like, what? What's the problem? He said, for the last 6 days, every evening the mother and the host family give me dinner, and for the last 6 days I've said, this is quite good. Meaning, what he meant was this. I'm quite sure what she understood was that. Kind of 6 out of 10, maybe try harder, he was mortified, but that is how what he said came across in that context. Avoid the word quite, like the plague. As I said, even native English speakers don't necessarily agree with, may not necessarily agree with everything I've put up here, but that kind of proves the point. I agree with most of what's up there now, I think, but I could be open to persuasion that some of them might need moving somewhere else. The word is so vague, it's basically meaningless. Don't say quite. Just don't use it. Thank you. That's part one. We're going to move... thank you. Thank you. That's heavy. That's really heavy. Can't move. Jesus. Right. Now, yes.
I also wanted to say something. It depends what definition, for example, we give sick. Like if we say sick is like rad, awesome, and that's quite sick, dude. And that means that's fucking awesome.
Different spelling though.
No, there's no.
But otherwise, we would use really, that's really sick. That sounds better than quite awesome.
Sure, yeah, I would accept that. In some contexts, it's perhaps less used. Yeah, fair enough. Another question?
Oh yeah, one more context from the US. For me, a lot of those usages of quite with an adjective just sound like things I would never say. For me, I mostly would say not quite. Would very rarely use quite as a word.
I've heard that from other people that in current American usage, it sounds somewhat old-fashioned or possibly British, or possibly both. Maybe you associate the two together, I don't know. But yeah, it's probably less common in American usage like that, yeah. Okay, cool. Now here we go, right. So, onto the joy of phrasal verbs. Note, no actual joy is involved in the learning of phrasal verbs at all. Now, quick show of hands, who's a native speaker of English here? Okay, who's learned English as a second language? Okay, so about half of you have been through this, excellent. Okay, cool. Now, no actual joy involved. So I discovered recently there is actually a book called Phrasal Verb Fun by somebody called Peter Gray. He's a lying liar. They're not. So just to make sure we all know what we're talking about, what's a phrasal verb? It's a verb consisting of several words put together whose idiomatic meaning is non-obvious from the constituent parts. We're going to see a lot of examples in a minute, but usually small words that you put together which suddenly magic up new meanings that are not at all obvious when you see the words. Words such as put, get, set, go, bring, call, give, hold, small words like that, along with a preposition or two like up, down, around, about, on, with, on, from, to, and so on. You put these together and magic happens. Which is not always that easy to follow. We'll see. Now, the word with the longest definition in an English dictionary. This is a good question for native English speakers. What's the word in the dictionary that has the most number of pages dedicated to defining it? Go on, have a go. Get is certainly up there. I think in my dictionary, the one that I looked in, set was longer, but get, set, put, there are pages and pages and pages explaining everything that you can do with these words. They're awful, but there we go. So, the meaning is non-obvious from the constituent parts. Sometimes. So you get, for example, on is the opposite of off. So you can say, turn the TV on. You can say, turn the lights off. So turn on is the opposite of turn off. That's fine, that works. But if you chop a tree down and then chop it up, you don't end up back where you started. You don't have a tree again. You have firewood. It's not necessarily just because down is the opposite of up. And to get on with somebody, you can see where I'm going with this. To get on with somebody clearly is not the opposite of getting off with somebody. I'll leave you to explain that to your neighbours. Okay, good. There we go. Getting on with somebody, not the opposite of getting off with them. Don't make that mistake. So the meaning of the phrasal verb, of the group of words together, may be obvious, like switch on, turn off, switch on, switch off. That's fairly obvious what's going on there. With get on with someone, if you happen to know what that means, that's great. If you've never heard it before, there's not really any way to get off with somebody. Again, if you've never heard it before, you've no idea what that means. You just got to learn it. The words that make up the expression may look familiar, but it's a whole new word that you need to learn separately. There are traps with the word order as well. You can say switch on the TV. You can say switch the TV on. They mean the same. They're both fine. You can do that. You can say keep up the good results, keep the good results up, and that's all fine. You can do that. You can say switch it on and keep it up, but you can't say switch on it or keep up it because it's a pronoun. What kind of ridiculous rule is that? I don't know, but it is. It's like that. It's just like that. You've got to remember it. When the object is a pronoun, you've got to put it in the middle of the phrasal verb. You can't put it at the end, unless it's a non-separable phrasal verb. How do you know if it's a non-separable phrasal verb? Because you learnt it as a non-separable phrasal verb. There's no way to know. So you get examples like coming across something. It means to discover, but you can't come something across. If the object there is a pronoun, you come across it. You don't come it across. Why? Just because it's like that and you've got to learn it. Sorry. Because that's the rule. Now, this is completely obvious and to native speakers. They couldn't possibly make a mistake with this. And it's an absolute pig for non-native speakers to learn in the classroom. There is hundreds of hours of study involved in getting these committed to memory and getting them right every time you use them. And it's a quagmire. And there's also, again, a trick of word order. Seeing a scheme through is completely different from seeing through a scheme. To see through something means like to discover the evil intent behind it. I've seen through your scheme. But to see a scheme through means to pursue it until the end, to keep going until the end of it. They almost appear to be the same phrasal verb, but one's separable and one's not, and it's a completely different meaning. What a nightmare. Why do we even use this language? I don't know. And one combination of words, two of these words plucked out of the air and put together, can have a whole array of wildly different but super specific uses. So, for example, to bring up. Native speakers, keep your hands down for a minute. Anybody else in the room? What can you bring up? A child. Okay, you can bring up your children. What else? An idea. Bring up an idea for discussion. Yep, good idea. What else have we got? There's at least half a dozen up here. There will be in a moment. Bring up a child. Okay, native speakers, help us out. You can bring up your dinner. Excellent. What else can you bring up? Go on, Shadow. Any more? So we've got three meanings. Just the literal meaning, bring something up from downstairs. Just the literal non-idiomatic meaning. If something's down there and you want it up here, bring it up when you come. There we go. Bring up a child, as we said. You can bring up your dinner. Thank you for that one. It's up there. Bring up troops to the front line. If you're a general and you're organising your armies, the expression that's used is to bring up the troops to the front line. There you go. Bring up a question for discussion, as we said, and one that I stumbled on. Although I'd never thought of that, but yes, the chain on his ankle brought him up short, and he fell on his face. So to bring someone up, a different meaning of bringing someone up, not bringing up a children, but it's an unusual use. I understand it straight away, but it's not something I would ever think of saying. But it's there. It's in the book cited there. So. One pair of words can have this whole array of different meanings, but only these super specific things. If you change one of the words slightly, you end up with something completely different, potentially, or just something completely nonsensical. It's easy to just mix up one little word in here and completely lose the sense of what you were saying, and it's just a string of words with no meaning whatsoever. Horrible things. The one small bit of good news in all of this is that British and American usage is pretty similar. There are no radical differences that I'm aware of between British and American uses of phrasal verbs. There's a few little ones like we fill in forms, Americans fill them out. We get on with people, Americans get along with them, and so on. But there are no massive differences, no systematic differences that I'm aware of between British and American usage. Somebody's going to put their hand up and point something out, I know, but generally British and American usage is pretty similar on those. But the fact that you've got these very, very similar sounding expressions that can have a whole array of different meanings gives huge potential for wordplay and for silly jokes, of which I'm a big fan. This morning in another lecture, I heard this. As you get older, your capacity to pick up a language decreases, but your capacity to pick up a book increases. I like that. Phrasal word pun, I like that. So thank you, Gareth Popkins, for that one. I think he was quoting somebody else, but I didn't get the name down in time. There's also this one. I love this one. My wife phoned me at work to say that the alarm had gone off. So I rushed home to see what the problem was, to find her on the sofa watching the TV. I said, "What do you mean the alarm's gone off?" And she said, "Yeah, they haven't had a decent album since The Sound of the Fury in 2007. Silence. Okay. The alarm had gone off. Now, the alarm, obviously, they're a band. To go off means, if you say the alarm have gone off, they're not as good as they used to be. Okay, now a fairly obscure meaning of that phrasal verb, to go off, which may be news to some of you. What else can go off? Milk, cheese, yeah, okay, food, generally. What else?
The alarm can go off, and then later the alarm can go off.
Right, the alarm's gone off is actually ambiguous in itself, even if we're talking about the fire alarm. When the fire alarm starts, you go, "Oh God, the alarm's gone off, everybody out." And then 20 minutes later, it stops, and you say, "Oh, it's okay, the alarm's gone off now." Yeah, you're absolutely right. Thank you for pointing that out, yes. When I was a student, I was standing talking to a friend once, and somebody just ran in, somebody else we vaguely knew, ran in, just physically picked up my friend and started running away with him. And he shouted, "Put me down, put me down!" And he went, "Okay, you're fat, you're stupid, you'll never amount to anything." And put me down, you see. To put someone down. We could do a whole other page of meanings of put down. What can you put down? You can put something down.
Put somebody down.
You can put somebody down in what sense?
Well, it means you're belittling them.
Right, belittling them, insulting them. Yeah, exactly that. Or...
Fire.
Sorry?
Fire.
Put down a fire. No, you put out a fire. Put out a fire.
Put down a cat or an animal.
Right, you can put down a sick pet. Sorry.
Put down a chair.
You can put down the chair, thank you, yeah. Exactly. You put down an animal when it's near the end of its life and it's in pain. The vet gives it an injection and puts it to sleep, puts it down. Oh, very good. I hadn't thought of that. Yes, put down a deposit on a house. Put down money. I'd never thought of that one. Thank you very much. I'm going to add it to my collection. Yeah, cool. So each one has this array of super specific meanings, but for example, we just heard the fire. Sorry to quote you, but yeah, with a fire, you don't put down a fire, you put out a fire. Putting down a fire could only mean that you were holding it, it's burnt your hand, so you put it down. Yeah, okay. So, quick test. You've just spent the night with a host who's giving you somewhere to sleep for the night. What's the appropriate thing to say in the morning when you're leaving? "Thank you for putting up with me." Thank you for putting it up me. Thank you for putting me up. Thank you for putting me up to it. Ooh. Thank you for putting out for me. For the non-native speakers in the room, at least 2 of these mean thank you for having sex with me. So don't say those ones, but unless you did, obviously. But yeah, obviously the correct answer is C, okay. But these are all perfectly correct English. They're all perfectly grammatical. They all have meaning. Most of them are not what you actually wanted to say. Be careful out there. Yeah, so, people taking photos. Go on, take a picture. There we go. So, phrasal verbs. Are they simple? Are they complicated? Well, opinion is split. Because if you look at, for example, what's he called? Mr. Ogden's ABC of Basic English. This is Basic English, the supposedly simplified version of English that you can, 850 words with which you're supposed to be able to express just about everything you want to say. But there's a little shortcut in there, which they don't tell you about, which is that words like put and get and on and off and out and so on are all in there. And are all used exactly as the way that they're used in native English. If you pick any text in Basic English, you'll find phrasal verbs in there. So, yeah, the words are nice and short, and they're all familiar words, but the meanings are cryptic in the extreme to anyone who's not a native English speaker. If you want to be really understood by non-native speakers, final advice, other way around. With native speakers, you'll sound much more natural if you use these all the time. Get as many as you can under your belt and throw them in, pepper your conversation with phrasal verbs. It's what we do all the time. It comes completely naturally to native English speakers. We use them absolutely all the time, particularly in speech. In writing, we're slightly more likely to go for Latin-derived longer words than the short phrasal verbs, but not necessarily, not exclusively. If you use the Latin-derived longer words, you might sound a bit pompous, but you're much more likely to be understood by everybody present. Internationally, to be understood, avoid phrasal verbs like the plague. Don't you, well, a few very, very common ones perhaps, but don't overuse them at all. Going back to putting out a fire. Putting out can be, and we've just seen another example with put out. Putting out, you can put out a fire, you can put out a cigarette, you can put the cat out, not because it's on fire, put the cat outside. What else can you put out? Exactly, you can feel put out. If somebody's said something that makes you upset, I feel put out. Exactly. And there are probably more. So don't say that. If you mean extinguish, say extinguish. If you mean put outside, say take outside. What you say will be much clearer and much less likely to be misunderstood with an international audience if you avoid the phrasal verbs. And finally, of course, just don't say quite, ever. Thank you. So, thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Feel free to shout your questions from the back. Mr. Gone quiet. You were all shouting earlier. Yes, go ahead.
So what about using quieting expressions, like quiet at you, for example?
Okay, you're right. I'm exaggerating slightly by saying don't say quite ever. So, actually, even quite a few. Quite a few is a weird expression. It's quite common. It's very common, most common. You hear it a lot, people saying quite a few. But for someone at a basic level, it's not the clearest way to express yourself because it kind of means the opposite of a few. Quite a few actually means the same as quite a lot. You should probably avoid both of those, to be honest. It depends to some extent on the level of English of your audience. But if you're not sure, if you've got a mixture of abilities, avoid quite a few. Avoid even quite a lot. If you mean a lot, say a lot. If you mean a few, say a few. Go with that. Any other questions? Or comments? Or anything you violently disagree with in what I said? Yes?
What's the funniest mix-up of a phrasal verb you've ever heard?
I mean, a phrasal verb, actually. That's a good question. Sorry? The question was, what's the funniest mix-up of a phrasal verb that I've ever heard? Off the top of my head, I can't immediately think of an example. I once had a massive argument with somebody because they'd used a third conditional instead of a second. It's not quite an answer to the question, but
Very funny,
she didn't mean to, and I should have worked out what she meant, but I didn't, and yeah, anyway. A phrasal verb, I'll tell you about that later. I can't immediately think of an example. Maybe someone else has one. I should prepare a few, you're right. I'll collect them from now on when I hear them. Thanks for the idea. Any more? it's all gone quiet. Okay. If you have any other comments or questions, do feel free to come and talk to me at the end. The I can send you the. I can send you the slides if you like. You mean the test? Here we go. Hang on. The test. That one. Right. Okay. I'll put that up there. Okay. If there's no more questions, thanks very much for coming. Oh, so go on. Another question. One more. Go ahead.
All I wanted to say, is that, for example, we could change certain phrasal verbs in English by adding, a particle called it, for example, in slang English, the difference between to set off and to set it off. Don't set it off, don't start a fight,
Yeah.
go rub me the wrong way.
What you're talking about is the difference between the transitive meaning of the verb and an intransitive meaning. To set off is an intransitive verb. There's no direct object in grammatical terms. So, that has a specific meaning. And to set something off, you can set off a firework, you can set off a fight, but setting off something with a direct object, that's a whole different meaning of the same verb. Like with put out here. Putting the cat out, putting a cigarette out, that's transitive meanings with a direct object. Putting out is rather an unfortunate expression, but in the intransitive sense, suddenly has a sexual meaning that is completely non-evident from the words themselves. So yeah, it's a common thing. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. Thank you. Yes?
Another thing.
Go ahead.
I was wondering if you know why historically they developed in English, but not in other languages which are close to English. If there's something special about why they exist in English.
Phrasal verbs. They're not uniquely English. The only other languages that I know very well are French and Esperanto. Right, I was going to say, yeah, I know a little German, and that things like washing up is abwaschen in German. So there are parallel examples. Maybe there are people who know a lot more German than I do here.
English has them too.
Really? Okay.
It's a Germanic thing.
Okay, so
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So Swedish, Dutch, Danish, German. Also, it seems to be a Germanic thing.
One of the things about the thing about Dutchers in German is that they would put them in a different order. In Dutch and German, that prefix or that preposition would come at the beginning and turn into a prefix.
Turn into a prefix, but then you
Swedish
separate.
and so on, it would be put as a preposition after them.
And in German, you separate them and put it
Yes,
as well. Yeah. Okay. So
Yes.
right. Okay. Like in English with the coming across is inseparable and okay.
But in English, the thing about English is that English always wants to split these things. English wants to have a space, and in Dutch and German, you cannot have a space there.
English wants to split them, except all the ones that you're not allowed to split. Yeah.
In German, you have the separable and the inseparable ones as well.
Right. Okay.
And also, you can put them together, but then you have to put the stress differently. You have
Right.
to stress them differently. So you can geh über something.
Yeah.
You can also übergehen, which is something completely different.
Okay.
It's exactly the same.
Right,
You
okay,
have
yeah.
the verb and
So it appears to be a feature of lots of Germanic languages. I would say the big difference is that nobody's pretending that German or Dutch or Danish are a brilliant means for international communication. Lots of people claim that English is. There was another question up here.
Not so much a question, so much as just there are some phrasal verbs which, to borrow your terminology, can be either separable or not with different meanings.
Go ahead.
Run up a ramp
Yeah.
versus to run up a large bill.
Yes. Or to run. Can you run something up? You can run up. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. So you can run something up or run up something. So yeah, with it can be separable or inseparable with two different sets of meanings. The separable version has at least two meanings that we spotted there. Yay! Nice and clear for everybody. Good. Did you all get that? No. Thanks for that. Good example. Thank you. Any more? Go on. Yeah. Go ahead.
Just fun, what do every one of those phrases actually mean?
Okay, good, fair question. What do these actually mean? Thank you for putting up with me. Thank you for tolerating my presence. Okay, thank you for putting it up me means literally what it sounds like. Okay, something was literally put up me. No, it sounds more sexual than that. And thank you for doing that to me. That's kind of an unusual sentence, but it's the kind of thing that could come out if somebody got the words a bit wrong and misremembered how the phrasal verb's supposed to work, and it sounds silly. Thank you for putting me up is the correct answer. That's what you say when somebody's giving you somewhere to sleep the night. In the morning, you say, thank you for putting me up. Thank you for putting me up to it is perfectly good grammatical English with a completely different meaning. Putting me up to it means encouraging me to accomplish this thing. I think putting me... Okay, yeah, it can be to convince someone, it can be to encourage someone, or just to nominate them for it. Actually, yes, it's broader than what I said. Yes, you're right. Thank you.
Make me do it or set me on the path towards doing it?
Yeah, all of that. So it's a fairly broad set of meanings, but in some way getting me to do this thing. Okay? And thank you for putting out for me means thank you for having sex with me. There we go. Don't say that one. Okay? Putting out? Oh, come on. Putting out? Sure.
You must be put out now.
Thank you. Right, okay. On that note, I think we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much for your presence. Thank you. I'll see you soon.